Hello, everybody. Welcome to another 12 Days of the Comic Source episode. If you've been tuning in for our special holiday episodes we do every year, then you'll know this year we're doing Fireside Chats with 12 of my favorite creators. So, of course, I had to include the incredibly talented Chris Condon, have him come in and talk about his career overall, holiday traditions, some of the books he's currently working on. So, Chris, it's great to have you on, man.
Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we talked a little bit at New York Comic Con, kind of about Green Arrow and that coming to an end and what have you. And so I definitely want to dive into that. You have a couple of other ongoing, Ultimate Wolverine also coming to an end, but currently an ongoing, and then news from the Fallout. I mean, so many great things. But we have to start with, I think it's fair to say, the book that kind of put you on the map, so to speak, because you and Jacob are coming back to it, and that's That Texas Blood. So for any of our listeners that aren't familiar with That Texas Blood, why don't you give everybody the synopsis of the story, and then for longtime fans, if they haven't heard, go ahead and give them the good news.
Uh, I'm the worst at pitching the book because I just tell people that it's a story about a fictional West Texas county where bad stuff happens. But that kind of does sum it up. But it's each arc is a standalone arc. We deal with a specific county, fictional West Texas county, and the people that live in it, and we get to see them through different time periods and get to see them deal with different situations. The first story arc is about it's a neo-Western, neo-noir story set modern day. And the second story arc is set in 1981, and that one is a cult sort of horror story. And then the third arc is a serial killer thriller set in 1992. And then we also have a spin-off called The Anfield Game Massacre, which is set in 1875, and that is just a straight up, Western. And the good news is that we are coming back with a fourth volume, which we've been wanting to do for a while, and then we got busy, and then we kept kicking it down the road and kicking it down the road, and we're finally getting to it after we've released Peril of the Brutal Dark, which is going to be our Vertigo book.
Yeah, I've got that on my list to talk about as well, and I'm really excited for that. But the thing about That Texas Blood that I think it's very indicative of other work you've done, and it's great. Like, you and Jacob poured your heart and souls into this thing. It got critical acclaim, and I think it, rightfully led to other projects for both of you. And so, yeah, perfectly understandable that you guys kind of had to, put this on pause, if you will, but also great that you're coming back, because getting back to that idea of, I think why it epitomizes your work is the humanity of it, that it can be sort of tragic in a way, but so just immensely human and relatable. And yeah, maybe all of us don't have, these crazy crimes, serial killers or whatever, in our past, but certainly I think people of our generation, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about news Fallout, it's easy to look back at world events or events on our own lives with nostalgia, rose-colored glasses, but you also remember those times where things weren't so great, and that certainly is the case for the main character Joe Bob, who's the sheriff that you see on the cover here if you're checking us out on YouTube. So I think that was just inherent in the way that you guys built it out. So coming back to it, has it felt any different? Now that you've gone and done some other things that a lot of times have kind of that same emotional touch point, both with Jake and without?
I've said for a while now that I can't wait to go and write Joe Bob and Company again because I feel like it will be coming home. And I've said that many times, and I thought it would be true, but I didn't know how true it was. And then I started writing it again, and it was like, at first I was a little rusty, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Why doesn't this feel right? And then kind of reset things, and once I did that, it just started flowing again, and it was just so nice to get back to these characters and to their world. And so this next arc is going to be set in 2003, so it's another another era that we're dealing with, and yeah, it was so nice to kind of just get to spend time with these characters, and a lot of the part of the issue that I've written so far has been this is the first issue I'm talking about, the first issue back, which will be issue 21. And so far it's just a lot of the characters kind of talking. Um, and it was just so nice to not have to worry about a page count and I have to get to this scene and this scene. And the thing is that that's kind of how we did that Texas Blood, and I think that's what was great about it when we were coming out with it regularly, was that we took our time with things. And so in working on this, I mean, I don't think that it's overstaying its welcome, but I think that it's such a breath of fresh air for me as a writer, going back to this style of writing, which I mean, I think is there in the other stuff I'm doing, but it's certainly much more prevalent in something like that Texas Blood. Um, and it's just really really fun to get back to it and just get back to those characters and just let them have that moment, which I think fans will be happy about.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm highly anticipating the return of it because you and I we've talked before about kind of the idea of the western and how it's similar to horror as well, where it can be so relatable and you can tell so many different types of stories. You've got the stuff you're doing in some of these anthologies, high strangeness and the thing with Oni, the cruel universe, or whatever it is, but also the other thing, Oni, the last time I had you on, the goddamn tragedy, which is a mixture of western and horror, and I think a lot of times it comes down to the pacing, right? Like especially if it's horror, you want it to be a certain pace because you want to keep the tension ratcheted up. But when I look at that Texas Blood, although there's the tragedy that's inherent in a lot of the stories, and there are horrific things, serial killers and what have you, it is a story that does take its time, and I kind of liken it to kind of sitting on the front porch, with your grandpa or something, and he's spinning a yarn, and it's just it's good storytelling, and if for that reason it feels more immersive. So have you heard that from any other readers about from our perspective how it just feels a little more kind of lived in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the funniest things for me as a writer, this was my first book. That Texas Blood was my first book, my first published book. It wasn't the first thing I've written, but it was the first thing that got published. And I never did any of the zines or anything like that. Never released anything digitally, aside from Brutal Dark, which we'll get to
Yeah.
obviously. But we had already done the first issue or two of that Texas Blood by the time we did that. Um, but yeah, one of the things that people often say to me is that they really find the humanity of the character shining through. A lot of people will tell me that, there was one that I still kind of go back to. There was a guy at the end of volume two, who emailed us because we have an email on the back of that Texas Blood. Um, and the guy emailed us and said he's been reading comic books for 40 years and he's never cried while reading this book.
Wow.
And he was so moved by what happened at the end of that arc. And specifically, there's a letter from a character named Wayetta. Um, and I think it's from Wayetta. But anyway, it was this thing that we did, and apparently it really connected with him, and that's the thing that I always hear from readers specifically about that Texas Blood, is that it really connects with people, and that's the thing that I hear a lot from people about Green Arrow as well. Specifically, that there's something about that character and the way that we're doing that character, Montes and myself and Buddy and Adriano, that it connects with people. I think that that's probably more of a political minded
Yeah.
thing, where we're kind of touching on some things that are in the news today. But it's a similar wavelength, and yeah, we always hear from people that it's immersive. I mean, the same thing with News from the Fallout. The immersiveness of that story. I mean, it's a different kind of story. It's a different um, uh, we approached it in a different way, but it was immersive as well, and that was, on purpose. I love those kinds of stories. I like getting lost in a story. Um, my favorite thing, reading a book or watching a film is just forgetting that I'm sitting there, you know, ingesting something, and I become a part of that world,
Yeah.
and so I want to try to deliver that same thing to my own readers, because that's what I would like.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, we're going to talk about Green Arrow next, actually. But one last thing about coming back to this. You mentioned for you really felt like coming home. Um, Getting back to work with Jacob on this book that you guys created together. Probably similar for him then as well. Like, it took a little bit to get back in, or did you guys vibe right away again?
Well, he hasn't started drawing it yet.
Okay, gotcha.
But I've just started writing. I actually started writing it a while ago and then axed it all and started again, just because we ended up pushing back the date. But Jake did. We were at London MCM, which is a big convention in London, and Jake did a drawing of Joe Bob for a commission. And it was so funny to see him doing Joe Bob, and he was like, "Yeah, it comes natural to him,
Yeah.
doing this character." And in my mind, it might be more natural for him now than it ever was, but at the same time, Joe Bob looks better than ever.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of cool to see it, and we're going into this too with a different mindset where we are, um, we're working with we're going to work with Haas. On letters, so we're bringing a new letterer into the fold. We've typically done it just the two of us, but now Jake's a little busier, and so he can't do everything like he was. So I think we're going to bring in Mike Tivey, who's been doing the back matter and using the Fallout. But yeah, I mean, we both just really want to get back to doing these characters and living in this world because we love it, and that's honest. I really truly felt so it really did feel like coming home in such a profound way. I lived away from I'm from New Jersey originally. I live in New Jersey now, but I lived in Los Angeles for a number of years. And when I was there, I didn't always have the most money, so I didn't always come back home on the holidays. And I know that it's cliche, I'll be home for Christmas, that
Right.
song,
Yeah.
it's all melancholy. But one time I spent the holidays with my girlfriend's family and we were driving back. I think it was Christmas Eve or something. And that song came on the radio and I just lost it. And there is something about going home that is just so special. I mean, I don't know what it is about it, but this truly felt, it's hard to describe it because I don't want to make it sound like it's like fated or something like that, it's destiny, but it really felt like just like, oh, this is meant to be. Like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Just working on these characters and telling these stories. And I blew through 10 pages like nothing, whereas, I'd usually toil over that a little bit more if I'm writing Wolverine or Green Arrow or whatever. Um, it just comes so naturally to us, I think, and I think Jake's gonna find the same thing when he actually gets down to penciling it. There's just it's become shorthand for us at this point. And it's really great. And the thing is that it's also funny because the people are excited that we're coming back with more, which is very nice to see. But we would be doing the book if nobody read it,
Yeah. Right.
just because we love it so much. So it's really nice to see that people are excited too.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great metaphor, a great comparison that you make, about coming back to this and the same as coming home. I think one of the things about going home, as an adult, you've moved away. Like I live in Phoenix, I grew up in California. I don't get back, to my hometown anywhere near as much as I'd like, but you get back there and you're kind of reminded this is the place that made you what you are, right? And that comparison is so, like, apropos to this because this is the book that opened doors for you guys. And yes, you've gone and had the opportunity to do other stuff now, but you come back and you're kind of reminded, hey, this is the thing that people kind of knew us for first and loved, and it's still, just as great. These characters are just as great. The setting is just as great, and the stories you guys can create have just as much potential as anything that you've done elsewhere, or the volumes of that Texas Blood that have come out so far. So I think that's a lot of it, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's really interesting. Like even just the dialogue, it was really interesting to me. Just as a writer, somebody who does this stuff for a living now, just stepping back into it and just seeing, reading back the dialogue and going, oh wow, yeah, that's right. Like that's how it should sound. And it was so funny because a lot of the times I'll tinker with that sort of the dialogue over and over again, and it's one of the things that I think people say that I do well is dialogue, and this is just like just so natural. Just the banter and the characters are really fairly fairly defined. So it's just it's really fun to get back to. And yeah, you're right. It's a weird thing. I don't know how many other creators have that first thing that they did be a thing that they visit again as a creator. I don't know how often that happens. I'm sure it happens more often than not, but it's really fun to kind of get to go back. That it wasn't ended.
Yeah.
We can still tell stories. We can still go back. Um, and it's really fun for us, as creators to get to do that.
Yeah, get back in that kind of emotional state. And speaking of emotions, you kind of spoke to it with, how that Texas Blood has affected people. I know that in your finale for Green Arrow is probably going to cause some tears as well. You were telling me about it in New York that, even you going back and reading it were really affected by it. And, I've told you,
Yeah.
this is like he is such the perfect character for you to be writing. You've brought him back to that grounded street level kind of guy that I love best about Oliver Queen. But I also understand that, it hasn't been lighting the world on fire sales wise. And there's also a couple of other, we have Absolute Green Arrow coming, and then there's a Green Arrow team up book coming. So there's other Green Arrow material out there. So I understand kind of the realities of it. But I'm going to be sad to see this go. And from your perspective, are you going to miss writing Oliver Queen and writing Green Arrow?
Yes, because I love Holly, and it was really fun to get to like silly things. Just like that'd be cool if you do that with an arrow.
Yeah, yeah.
Like things like that are in my mind. But I love the way he talks, and he's just such a fun voice to write, and I love the world that we were creating with the detective Benny. But yeah, I do at the end of the day. We had 14 issues, 14 strong issues, I feel, and I also love the ending that we have. I think that it's a perfect ending for our story. I think it's a really, it like I was telling you in your Comic Con. I mean, this is it struck an emotional chord with me when I read it back, and as we were just finishing up the lettering last week. Uh, we were going over the final lettering for it before it goes to print, and Buddy, our letterer, um, reached out and was just like, I just wanted to let you know that this issue is why I got into comics.
Wow, great.
And that was like such a impactful thing to hear from somebody who's A, in the industry, but B, has been working on the book for now 7 issues. And it means a lot, but at the same time, that was exactly what I wanted to get out of the book, or out of this issue, this specific issue, because it started as, okay, I want to have a good conclusion. How do I conclude this? Well, and what happened was I started writing it, and it got away from me, but in a good way, and in a way where I feel like that. Isn't always possible with big two work. But we finished our story arc the in the issue before, and this was always gonna be kind of a epilogue, one shot, coda, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was that, and I had already written the solicit text, but I just found that the characters and the story was taking me to a different place than I thought I was going to go, and it wound up becoming almost a meditation on what comics mean to me and what superheroes mean to me and what they mean to the world, maybe. And it was kind of talked a lot about what I just feel about comics, how important they are to people. And I do feel like they're important to people. I mean, it's a huge part of your life that you do this, video series and
Oh yeah.
podcast, and I'm here doing this too. I mean, it's almost 7 o'clock here. I'm doing another podcast immediately after this one, and it's just, this is our life. Our lives are full lives. We don't really have a day off. We don't really have any hours off. We're just constantly always doing this. I mean, I'm still a collector. I still go to the shop and I buy books, and I haven't read my books this week, but I still go and I buy, and this is just so fully my life. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that. And it felt like this was the perfect opportunity and the perfect character to do that with, because this was a character that meant a lot to me, and was a very formative book for me. In high school, reading the O'Neill and Adams stuff really spoke to me. Um, so yeah, it was something really special, and I hope it feels that way to people. I hope people don't, read it and shrug.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it may resonate with some people more than others. It's always subjective, but I think I don't know if I've told you because I've had this conversation with so many different creators about how important the stories are, the fictions that we create. Right, you can tell what a society cares about or a culture cares about by looking at the fictions and the fantasies that they create. And
Yeah.
specifically for this character, Oliver Queen, he's always been somebody who's very aware of social issues and what have you. So you talk about superheroes being important, and it's like, man, no more important than right now with where we are kind of societally and politically and culturally. We need to be reminded and have those conversations. And that's what I've loved about your book. You're not hitting us over the head with it, but we're just reminded that we all could all have a little more empathy. We all could, reach out. We could help a little bit more. And it's especially true during this holiday season. So I think finishing it on that note and talking about the things that are important to us, the fictions that we create, and really, like, you're somebody that I consider a friend, and if it wasn't for comics, we wouldn't even know each other, and that's
Yeah.
probably true of a lot of your friends. It's certainly true, of a lot of my friends. A lot of my friends are comic book creators. So I think that finishing it on this note kind of speaks to that, and yeah, I can't wait to check it out, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be reaching out, and they're going to love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, let's go ahead and talk next about Ultimate Wolverine. This is another one of your books that has been ongoing for a while. It's a little bit different structured. If people don't realize the way that Jonathan Hickman set up the current Ultimate Universe in Marvel, is that it's happening in real time. So we literally get a month between each issue. And I think it was when I interviewed you at San Diego Comic-Con about the goddamn tragedy that you were talking about how different it is to write this book because you do have that space in between. So it's almost like a series of one-shots, but there are through lines. So, here you are a few more issues in now. How has that experience been? What's the reaction been? How are you enjoying playing in the Ultimate Universe?
I mean, I love it. So it's really funny. Yeah, I just turned in a couple of weeks ago. I turned in issue 15, which is our penultimate issue, and um, I really it is a different kind of book to write, and each one does have to have its. I feel like every issue kind of what I describe it like I want it to be like a cleaver coming down. So each issue has to be like pa-pum,
Yeah.
pa-pum, pa-pum, pa-pum. So it's got to have like an explosive moment. It's got to have a scary moment. It's got to have a this or that. It's got to have a violent moment because Wolverine. And just working on this book and working on these with these characters and getting to do cool things with a character like Wolverine is just I don't know. There's nothing better than I mean that first issue where he just drops out of a plane. I was like, I don't know if they're gonna let me do any of this stuff, and then they let me do it all. And then it was the best-selling book of my career, and I think in a lot of ways made um, me into the creator I am today because it put me on the map much more than anything else that I'd done at that point.
Yeah.
And so I really have to, thank the book for that. It is just it's a completely different beast of a book too because it's I don't tend to do sci-fi stuff too often, and this has strong sci-fi elements, fantasy elements. I think that's sort of inherent in superhero stuff, but with Green Arrow, it's so street level and human, whereas this is much. While there is like a lot of emotion in it. It's also an action book, and so when I was working on what the book would be, I kind of made a decision early on that this was going to be like a James Cameron movie. If it was directed by, if it was produced by James Cameron, but it was directed by Cronenberg. So it has those horror elements, it has those action elements and sci-fi elements, and kind of mashing those things together, and coming up with this really what I feel like is a cool X-Men book. Um, and I love what Peach Momoko is doing, and that's the other thing I love about what Hickman set up, and Will Moss, our editor, and what Dennis is doing, and Peach and Brian and everybody's doing. Um, we all have our unique takes on things, and mine is more. I wanted to make. I At the end of the day, like you have to put in a context of when I got offered this. I was just doing a lot of like for hire work,
Yep.
just getting random things. And I had just gotten Green Arrow, and I thought that was so exciting. And then I got an email from Will Moss asking me if I want to do Ultimate Wolverine, and he did tell me that it was going to be 12 issues at the time. And you kind of have to ask yourself, well, what would I do if I had Wolverine? And at the time, I wasn't where I'm at now. And I thought to myself, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to get a character like Wolverine again.
Right.
So I was like, well, let me just make what I think would be the most badass Wolverine book. That's not everybody's favorite Wolverine book, but it's mine. And I got to do so much of like Barry Windsor Smith, and dipping into the Claremont, uh, all that the Claremont mythos that he built over all those years, and even into the 90s and the animated series. And we use Forge's real name for the first time, Daniel, which has never been used. So it's really fun to get to do all that stuff, and I'm really fortunate to have this book under my belt.
Yeah, to be able to play in a universe where it's not so there's not so much history, there's not so much continuity that you have to worry about. Because you're right. I mean, there's a little bit of the mystery element that we used to have before we knew so much about who Wolverine is, because we're not even sure it's Logan at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think there was even an article I remember reading back when about people like, oh, is this Bucky Barnes because they call him Winter Soldier or what have you? But then also the body count is so high, like you never know who's going to survive. It's got that kind of Walking Dead thing where you never know. So I just love that it's so bombastic and over the top, but it still has that through line of kind of the nobility that Logan has. Once he kind of overcomes about halfway through overcomes the brainwashing and what have you. And I really appreciate that as well. That once he kind of emerged, even though this is an ultimate version of him, there are still parts of him that are recognizable, and kind of that nobility. I think is really important to the character.
Yeah. I felt like it was important to have, I think, some core element of the character there. And I mean, there was some discussion very early on about, who would be Wolverine in the Ultimate Universe. And, Will kind of floated the idea, maybe, you could do somebody else if you want. But at the end of the day, he reminded me that Logan will probably sell the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, kind of nudging me like, probably do Logan. And I love Logan, and at the end of the day, again, I don't know at the time I didn't know if I was ever going to get a chance to write any of these characters ever again, so I was just thinking to myself, well, I want to write Logan because of, when do what if I never get that chance again? So I wanted to make it like, because the way that I describe it, because yes, it is the Ultimate Universe, and that's why it's called Ultimate Wolverine. So it's this all new universe, but at the same time, I wanted to approach it from a different perspective, where I was looking at it from the perspective of what would the Ultimate Wolverine book be?
Right. Yeah.
Like what does that mean? So sort of in a similar way, to I think that this is like really, I just wanted to encapsulate what I felt like that character was, and what the coolest part about him, and kind of jettison any other fluff that we wanted to get rid of. This is just like pared down, just like badass guy doing badass things. And yes, there was the whole Winter Soldier aspect of him, which I loved writing, and that was so fun to get to play with and get to introduce these new characters. But out of it, I got to create some characters that I really fell in love with, like the Sabretooth, who's a good guy.
Yeah.
And that became my favorite character to write in the series, and became a larger character because of that. And I think those first 6 issues were really unique too, because I wrote them like I write that Texas Blood, which is I kind of veer off on my own. And then Marvel was like, "Hey, can you please follow
Yeah.
that one?" So the other ones are, I love everything that comes after too, but the first 6 are very unique to me, and I think very special to me, because of that. But yeah.
Yeah, and I do want to say anybody out there who has read Chris's independent stuff, or maybe you're a fan of his Green Arrow stuff, and you're maybe not necessarily a Marvel reader, and you're like, I don't want to pick up Ultimate Wolverine. Like, you can pick this book up, and you don't have to read anything else. Ultimately, like this really does kind of stand on its own. Some of the other ones kind of tie in a little bit more, but this really does kind of stand on its own, which I really appreciate. And you did mention that it was originally supposed to be 12, so. When you got the news that it was going to, go a little longer, but then the whole Ultimate Universe was ending, you're really getting to kind of write the ending that you kind of foresaw. Like it must have changed a little bit what you had planned for 12 versus 3 extra issues and what have you.
Not really, actually. So issue at 12 ends the way that I wanted it to. Technically, you can end, I wanted to end each volume a particular way. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
volume 1 ends with issue 6, which is pretty, tight story, and we end with, not spoiler, but Winter Soldier is no longer in control, and he's back to Wolverine. And then issue 12, we get to a certain point where that's going to end, and then you'll read that volume and you'll feel like, okay, I got a complete story here.
Right.
And then same thing with issue 16. It's going to end in a particular way, and you're going to go, okay, I feel like I've gotten a full story. So each volume is sort of in the same way, like Texas Blood. Like I feel like they kind of are their own things. And so I wanted it to feel that way. I wanted it to be I wanted to tell that full 12-part story, and I sort of feel like issues 13 to 16 are the coda, and they kind of spill out of the events of issue 12, and all the preceding issues as well. And I really am loving what we're doing in this coda part of it, and I feel like it's really unique and different, and we're getting to play with some characters that have been there, but we haven't really explored so much, and that's really fun. I get to do some cool stuff as well. Alessandro's doing an amazing job, and yeah, at the end of the day, like when they told us, they didn't tell us we were doing more. How it worked was that they asked me if I wanted to do more, and I said, well, I'll do more if you get Alessandro.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, because I was happy doing 12, I liked our ending. I thought it was great. But if we can get the team back together, if we can get the team back and, do those extra issues, that would be great. And out of that, sort of thinking about where things ended in 12, I'm like, okay, I think I know exactly where we're going to go in 13, 14, 15, and 16. And that's working out pretty great, I think, in my opinion. I mean, I think the scripts are turning out really, really interestingly. And getting to play with some new characters as well, introducing new characters, which is a fun thing that we get to do throughout the series. Introducing new characters and getting to see what they are like in the Ultimate Universe, and if there's anything different, are they the same? If they are more of the same, why? So things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love what the kind of the playground that Jonathan created and allowed you guys to come in and play. It's been fantastic. I'm just waiting for my Ultimate Wolverine action figure, man. Like,
Same.
He cries out to be, it'd be great if the mask was like removable or what have you. So, yeah, really, really, really cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about your other independent title that's coming out right now. I think there's one issue to go. And that's news from the Fallout. And
Issue 6 just came out this week, actually.
Okay, gotcha.
You're almost correct.
Almost. Okay, yeah. So I haven't
ended.
I have not read the final issue yet, so I definitely need to dig into that because the penultimate issue left us with such an interesting place. So, and me being kind of a child of the Cold War, like this one just speaks to me on so many different levels. But also visually, it's so different with what Jeffrey Allen Love does. You know, black and white, and so many things are silhouettes and what have you. And there's this starkness to it that kind of speaks to this, like, this is the dystopia, like, you know, early days, what have you. So, so interesting and so great. Is this a story that you've kind of had in your back pocket for a while?
Yeah. So, once upon a time when I was in high school, there was a story called The New Tribe. And this was sort of a story that was kicking around for a very long time. And I grew up loving Night of the Living Dead. It was one of those films that my mom told me about. And my mom's old. My mom is 80. My dad is 87. And my mom used to tell me about all these films that I couldn't see because they were too scary for me or too violent or whatever. But she would tell me about films like Night of the Living Dead and how it was the scariest thing that she had ever seen, and when the guy in the graveyard chases them and brains the brother, and it's just like all these, you know, they're coming to get you, Barbara, and all this, you know, it was all this kind of great stuff, and I just loved it, and so I always kind of thought to myself, well, you know, finally saw Night of the Living Dead and loved it, and then saw Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, and really loved those, and you know, got more into the zombie genre. You know, I mean, there's so many films, zombie genre.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, what would be my take on zombies? And I do think that we came up with a unique take on zombies, where they're not actually zombies; they're something else. They're called the rotten. It's almost more of a disease or a virus, and it's, you know, it's a it's a more unique thing than just, you know, this thing comes through and turns dead people, you know, into these living things that are undead. Um, you know, I always wanted to do that, and so I kind of had an idea of what it would be, and at a certain point, it did become a thing called News from the Fallout, and it was originally going to be set in New Hampshire, because I was on the East Coast and was thinking to myself, "Oh, that sounds interesting." And then thinking more on it, I was like, "Well, Nevada actually makes more sense, because if there's a nuclear fallout from a missile test, and it was always going to be set in the early '60s. That was always going to be the thing." But there was certain things from that New Hampshire story that stuck. One of those things was Mad Rob, this character that we introduced. And in fact, the opening of issue 2, I'd actually written in like 2013.
Oh wow.
So it's kind of funny to and I rewrote it obviously and kind of tinkered with it, but the idea was there, that this guy is an asshole.
Totally.
And you know, so it was really fun to kind of get to play with those things that were there a very long time ago, but you know, getting to revisit them now with my perspective now, you know, versus what I, you know, as a novice then, didn't really know what I was doing, but had ideas and I felt were good ideas, and you know, that's I continue to do that throughout my career. You know, I have a lot of stories that I've wanted to tell for a very long time, and I'm really fortunate that I'm getting to tell those. You know, News from the Fallout is one of those. Far Down Below is another one. I'm doing actually a newer story that I've come up with Charlie Adler. We're coming out with that next year. Um, so it's really fun to get to play with those like older ideas and get to, you know, see them come to life and see how you tackle them as a different creator in a different time in your life.
Yeah, again, we don't want to spoil because this is an incredible book to go and experience, and I think you guys should all go and read it. But there is this idea that this virus or disease or whatever you want to call it, you know, it's got a history on our planet. Was that part of your original idea? Or was that something you came up when you kind of brought it back to life?
So that was when it came back to life. So it's kind of funny how that happened, where I don't remember even how I thought of it. Which I'll just say spoiler. it was also in our preview pages, so I don't think that
Oh,
it's
okay,
that much of
okay,
a
fair
spoiler.
enough. Yeah,
But issue 5 opens 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs. And we learn that this thing that is happening in News from the Fallout has actually been around for a very, very long
yeah,
time.
really cool idea.
Which is a thing from, viruses are old.
Yeah,
And I love that fact. And I think that that's, one of the most interesting facts about our world, about our universe, is that everything is very old. Like, I mean, you might have just bought the lamp that you have on your desk, and it might be manufactured in, 2024 or whenever you bought it. But the atoms that make up that lamp have been here
yeah,
for a very long time.
billions of years. Yeah,
And I think that that's fascinating. So we wanted to kind of play with that. But the real reason that I wanted to do this was because Jeff told me that his son loves dinosaurs.
ah,
And
nice.
I thought it would be really fun to have him draw dinosaurs so that his son can go, oh my gosh, my dad is drawing dinosaurs.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so it was sort of an inkling of an idea that kind of got spurred into motion by real life, interests, I guess.
Yeah, well, and we did. I think it was issue 5. We got introduced to Gage, who's my favorite character of the book. He's so awesome, and issue 5 ended on a cliffhanger. So again, I can't wait to see how it all plays out with issue 6. But I want to ask about bringing Jeffrey on though. So was this
Mhm.
something that it was a situation where you wanted to do something with him? And you're like, oh, I have the story, or did you already decide to bring this back? And then you're like, who can I get to do it? Oh, Jeffrey would be perfect for it.
Well, so Jeff and I, we had met because of that Texas Blood. He did a variant cover for us for that Texas Blood issue 20.
Hmm.
And because of that, we started talking, and he told me that he wanted to do, direct market comics. He had done some graphic novels before, but they're sort of tone poems, if you will. They don't really have a narrative story, narrative structure. They're sort of these surreal things that you kind of float through. And he wanted to do a narrative, and he wanted to do a sequential narrative, and he wanted to do it in the direct market. And I didn't see why that wasn't a thing. I was kind of shocked that he's never done a book before. And it turns out he had some opportunities, and they've all kind of crumbled before they've come to fruition. Um, and I was talking to a publisher already about doing a book, which is the book I'm now doing with Charlie Adler. So kind of switched artists around a little bit, but I was already talking to a publisher about doing that book. And because the publisher was interested in it, I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity to try to bring Jeff on board. And so I tried to bring Jeff on board to that. And so this would include a page rate for him because it was going to be at this one specific publisher that it's not going to be at anymore, but whatever. So I was, trying to get him a page rate, et cetera, et cetera. And it didn't end up working because they just couldn't commit to Jeff. They just didn't know if it was going to be viable in the marketplace, et cetera. You kind of hear this over and over again
Oh yeah.
with Jeff's work. We
Yeah,
don't know how it's
which is
going to
so
sell.
frustrating too, right? Because it's like that thing where they want you to have experience, but if nobody will hire you to get experience, you can.
Right, but I
Yeah,
mean, we've proven that he is viable in the marketplace
yeah,
because not only was News from the Fallout selling well, it typically from issue 1 to 2 you have a 50% drop.
yeah,
It's just normal attrition. This is a thing in the comics industry. Everybody experiences it. News from the Fallout from issue 1 to 2, we had a 6% drop. And across the entire run from 1 to 6, we had a 39% drop. So across all 6 issues, we didn't even have the 50%
yeah.
drop, which is
Amazing.
incredible.
Yeah,
And I think that that speaks to Jeff's work and the fact that people were drawn in by his work and wanted to experience it and have it be a part of their collection. And yeah, I think that we, effectively proved everybody wrong about his work. But that, yeah, I wanted to do a story with him. I didn't know what the story was going to be. And after that project was falling apart at that one publisher, they were still interested in the story, but not Jeff. So I, was like, okay, well, let's do this other story that I've been kicking around for a long time. And I was gonna do News from the Fallout at Aftershock way back
Yeah.
after Hell is a Squared Circle, and I'm glad I didn't do it because it would have been a totally different book. And once I kind of approached Jeff with this idea, I kind of clicked. I was like, oh, well, this is perfect because we could do black and white. And I was going to letter it myself, and I'm gonna put that lettering in the back matter of the trade. And it's awful. You're gonna know why I'm not doing the lettering. But it was a match made in heaven, and it was just happenstance. It just sort of happened, and I couldn't imagine a better book, a better version of this book, than with Jeff on art.
Yeah, I mean, not to be too hokey, but yeah, it definitely seems like it was meant to be. It's at the right place,
Yeah,
and you're getting to
absolutely.
tell the story the way you want. And you mentioned the back matter. The back matter is awesome. Seeing the boxing poster
Yeah,
with Rob's name on it was really cool. So yeah, the diner menu, like
yeah.
all of it, it just helps to kind of really set the atmosphere because it's a very atmospheric book, and obviously Jeff's art contributes to that, of course.
Yeah, and one of the really cool things about the book too, that in the back matter, there's every time a phone number shows up, you can call that phone number, and there's somebody's going to answer it. So I mean, I don't know how long we're going to keep those up because you do have to keep those
Yeah,
up. And I don't think we're going to put them in the trade just because we would have to constantly be
yeah,
keeping these numbers up. But while the book was coming out, it felt like it was a really unique thing for people. And you mentioned before about immersive storytelling. I
yeah,
felt like this was a really great way to be immersive. And in the back of issue one, to be specific, there's a phone number on the menu, and if you call that number, the end of issue one actually plays out over the phone, and I thought it was really wonderful. And but one of the things that I thought was really fun about it was that it reminded me of an old radio show,
yeah,
and I sort of feel like that's what this book is too. Is like it's this radio show where it's kind of taking you on this journey, and you kind of don't really know where it's going, and and at times it's kind of talky, and it's like, but I love that about it. I think that it's really fun. It kind of feels like the static radio waves that you're reading. It's fun.
yeah. Well, and I think the kind of the narrative that you've built kind of leans into that because they are so isolated. It does feel kind of it's not like they can pull out their cell phone and call for help or anything like that. And
Yeah.
then where we've left them, and at the end of issue 5, in the mine, in the dark, kind of claustrophobic, what have you. Yeah, just it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's great. So again, everybody, I mean, pretty much recommend everything that Chris writes, but I'm calling out some specific things
Some more
here.
than others. I
Yeah,
think the
yeah,
image stuff is my personal favorite stuff that I've done. But I think that comes with ownership.
yeah.
I
Oh
think
yeah,
that you're inevitably going to run into that. I mean, I love the stuff I've done for everybody. I mean, most of the work I've done, I think is, I think is good, and if not, great. And I really put my heart into it, and I hope it is good or great to readers that are interested in reading it and putting their money into it. But the image work is ours.
right. Yeah,
We it is ours completely. For the back matter, I literally sit with Mike Tivey in his in his office at his house, and we build out every single page. And in particular, in issue 5, 6, and a few others, we didn't just do them on Photoshop. We actually made real things and then scanned them back in, so they had this real, visceral feel to
yeah.
them
Authenticity. Yeah,
because they are real.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a different experience doing an image book, and I want to continue to have that experience with image and making comics, and really fortunate to have that.
Well, it was announced at New York Comic Con that you have a Vertigo book coming. DC's brought Vertigo back, and we don't need to get into details on how much ownership you have or whatever. But it is interesting that it's coming back to something that you did, you and Jake did a long time ago, and that's Brutal Dark. Now, and I went looking because I'm a fan of yours. I've gone looking for Brutal Dark because I wanted to read the stuff that you've done prior. I couldn't find it anywhere, so I'm glad
Yes,
that it's
it is
coming.
not available
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, so I'm glad this is coming back. But are these going to be new? So for people that did read it back when on your Patreon, is this going to be new stuff? Is it going to be new versions of the stuff? Like, how exactly is it all going to play out?
So we only ever did so we did it in a way where it was I love the idea of serials. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I love a good cliffhanger, and that's how we kind of built out the initial version of this. Was that we were going to do it on the Patreon. We'd do it once a month. We'd do or two times a month, whatever. I don't remember what it was, but we were going to do 8-page issues. And just each one would kind of like introduce a new character, a new situation, and then it would end with a cliffhanger. How does he get out of this one, kind of
Yeah.
thing? And then we'd come back with another story. And we'd actually only done 3 of them. So the first 2 issues of this kind of are all of the story that was in those 3 issues are in the first 2 issues of Brutal Dark. But even then, these issues are very different.
Right.
And I went back and looked at those initial issues, and it's kind of funny to look at it now and be like, oh, wow, we got so much better.
Yeah. Okay.
As just storytellers, as craftsmen, whatever you want to call us, like we're just better at what we do now. And I'm glad that we took the time to come back to it because we did want to go back to it. That was always in the back of our minds. We wanted to do it. And we actually were trying to. It's really funny how this all happened because this is sort of a more noirish story, but it's also an adventure story. So I like to call it hard-boiled adventure. It's kind of how I describe it. So it's almost like Indiana Jones if the Indiana Jones character was Sam Spade. So that's kind of how we like to describe it. And it kind of came out of an email with Chris Conroy where he was interested in us doing an adventure book. And I was like, well, I got an idea already. And I pitched him Brutal Dark, which is what it was initially called. And it's now called The Peril of the Brutal Dark. But it's a lot of that Patreon comic that we were doing that back then has kind of ported over, including the subtitle, an Ezra Kane mystery. I think it was an Ezra Kane adventure in the previous version. But a lot of it has stayed the same, and I mean it's still got the cliffhangers, and each issue has a cliffhanger, and each issue is going to have back matter and all this kind of fun stuff. And yeah, we're just having such a good time, and I think it's Jake's best work next to. I think he's also just getting better in general because I do think that his work on Everything Dead and Dying is also really great. That's his book of Tape Rumble that's coming out currently. Great book. But I do think that his work in Peril of the Brutal Dark is some of his best ever, and he's really pushing himself into places that he wouldn't typically go. New York City in 1941, for one of those, to be very specific. But it's really cool to get to see him do some big adventure and to do some, that's kind of nitty gritty, noirish kind of, lighting. And it feels very Mignola in a way, without being the simple sort of, I forget exactly how to describe the work that Mignola does, but it's the very simple structures in how he creates, but he has those deep blacks, and that's what Jake is bringing to this. And it's really fascinating to watch. And some of that I think has ported over into what he's doing in Everything Dead and Dying, because we did do the first issue of Brutal Dark a while ago. So we would have that done and able to share with people. And I think some of that found its way into his inking on Everything Dead and Dying. And again, I do think that his work has just gotten better and better and better because of it.
Yeah, I mean, he did this cover, and on your Patreon, there's because you guys share your Patreon, there's an article about he goes through the process of how he built it, and we get images to see how it comes together. It's so awesome. It's just so great. You mentioned
people should check out our Patreon.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put a link in the show notes, everybody, to go.
Thank you.
And yeah, a lot of great back matter and behind the scenes stuff that both Chris and Jake share. You mentioned it being 1941. And I think it's in the solicit or description or what have you where he talks about Ezra Kane punching Nazis. So it is also going to be of that time. Is that a time frame like that early 40s? Something that really interests both you and Jake?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we love those kind of adventure stories, especially Indiana Jones and all that kind of thing. But I grew up with grandparents who lived through, you know, the you know they're from Czechoslovakia, they're from Eastern Europe, so they escaped before any of that stuff happened, and so and I've always been fascinated with it. And unfortunately, it has gone away.
Yeah,
But I've always been fascinated with that time period because it was such a pivotal moment in the century, in the just the entirety of the human race. I mean, this was just such a huge pivotal moment. Where I do think that everything that's come after has kind of happened because of this thing that happened.
yeah,
I mean, spilling out of that, I mean, we have, the atomic weapons are created and all of this, and so our entire world now is a creation of that time period. And I think that that's kind of a fascinating thing. And it's definitely interesting to go back and kind of see this early 20th century where it's sort of rudimentary technology and things like this start to become this modern world.
yeah,
And it's fascinating to watch and to see, and I think that's one of the things that's always fascinating about the U.S. and the Nazis and the Soviets and creating technology and this race to create bombs and eventually after the Nazis are put out of existence. Say
yeah,
that with a grain of salt
yeah,
now.
exactly.
Um, but the Nazis are, not don't have a stranglehold on Europe anymore, let's say. And it becomes a space race between the Soviets and America. And so I find that stuff like really fascinating, and it's really great to get to play with that. And yes, this is set in November of 1941, so it's right before Pearl Harbor in December of 1941.
Awesome.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's like a really interesting period in America, specifically in New York. And there were a lot of things going on in New York at the time, and we don't really touch on half of it, but it's really great to get to play in that sandbox.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just creates that atmosphere like we talked about before. And I mean, for what it's worth, I completely agree with you. Like World War II and like culturally, what comes after, like the boom that we had of prosperity in this country that literally led to the generation known as, baby boomers or boomers as they're called now. And the way they're still grasping onto power, like you can trace the through line, like
Yeah.
our generation's been sort of forgotten. Like, when's our turn? And now it's already the younger generation that have surpassed us. So yeah, we could go on for days about it. But again, we don't want to spoil too much. But I did want you to kind of describe who Ezra Kane is. So maybe anybody that's on the fence, like, I don't know if this is for me. Obviously, it's noir because you and Jake are doing it. But what's our touchstone? Where are we going to relate to Ezra Kane? How do you describe him as a character?
He is a driven. He's funny, which is one of those things that I think is just really immediately endearing. He's funny. He's good with. He's got a great banter, which I think is important in that kind of noirish cadence. But I think one of the things that I love about him is that he's got a haunted soul. He had he had experiences in the First World War that are part of him, and they've changed him. And he made choices. Before the war, he was a different person. After the war, he was a different person, and he became a cop and then a PI. And these things were not necessarily what he was going to be. And I find that very relatable. And I think it makes him a very interesting character and one that I hope people want to see for more than just these six issues.
Yeah, and again, go check out the Patreon because there's some preview pages there from the first issue, so
Yeah.
you get a sense of what it's going to be like. So, obviously, we're getting crime noir. Anything supernatural or horror bent, or is it going to be more
Yes.
kind of? Oh, okay, we will.
Definitely supernatural, sci-fi, fantasy. Yeah, there's a lot in it that's kind of, and that was always baked into it. This is another one of those older ideas. This is something that I was drawing as a comic myself in high school, and then tried to write it as a screenplay for a class and when I lived in California, and then brought it back to the Patreon eventually, and then now it's going to be a Vertigo book. So full circle.
Full circle, yeah. Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, it's been so great. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me, Chris. It's been great to go over different things and kind of reflect on your career. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Let's finish up talking a little bit about holiday traditions. You mentioned growing up on the East Coast, so snow at Christmas and that sort of thing. So, what are some of the traditions you had growing up, and maybe that have even continued into today?
Well, I would say there's a Christmas Eve tradition, which is an old tradition from my grandfather, which is you have to drink a hot toddy on Christmas Eve. So that's what we do in my household. We drink a hot toddy. But I love the cold weather. I love bundling up in a blanket and just reading a book. In traditions, I think that's probably the biggest tradition, and then watching It's a Wonderful Life is another. Gotta watch It's a Wonderful Life. So that's what I would say of my traditions. But I love the time that time of the year. It's so comforting and warm,
Yeah,
despite it being cold.
yeah, a time to reflect and obviously spend time with the ones that you love. What about? I always have to ask about Christmas song. Like we start listening like right after Halloween. We're already listening to Christmas music.
Yeah.
You get into any of the traditional Christmas music?
Of course. I mean, yeah, of course. I love. I mean, there's a lot of things that I enjoy. I mean, I really enjoy the soundtrack to Charlie Brown Christmas. I love that soundtrack. I let that play ad nauseum. I love all the classics, especially the ones that Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin recorded. Andy Williams. I mean, these are like to me that like it just feels like Christmas. So that's those would be I think the mainstays for me.
Yeah. What about Tony Bennett has a great Christmas album too? Is that one that you?
No, yeah, but I never really got like super into Tony Bennett. But yeah, I mean that's certainly in the shuffle for sure.
Fantastic. Well, again, Chris, thanks so much for taking the time. Looking forward to continuing to read your work, and I'm sure you have more things to touch on and announce. You kind of mentioned the book with Charlie Adler in the new
We'll
year.
talk again next year.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk again next year. So happy holidays to your family. Hope you guys have a real joyous time.
Likewise to you and yours.
Appreciate it. And everybody out there joining us, we hope you enjoyed it. We wish you happy holidays. Hope it's a happy and healthy time. And we'll talk to you on the next.